You're gonna love this shit. The internet is full of trolls. Why did this controversy take off? So what is the internet being filled with trolls have anything to do with legitimate concern over Balenciaga? Well, the New York Times goes on to say, as online criticism of the campaign spread, the story was picked up across right-leaning media outlets, including the New York Post and the primetime Fox News show Tucker. The show has helped to publicize and mainstream QAnon, the internet conspiracy theory that a group of Satan-worshipping elites who run a child sex ring are trying to control our politics and media. Okay, you could just, it's that black and white? We're in a post-nuance world, I guess. I'm just trying to get a feel for what the New York Times is, how they're referring to us, right? So where did the copy of the Supreme Court decision come from? Who approved its use as a prop? They're all supposed to be fake office documents, Balenciaga said. They turned out to be real legal papers, most likely coming from the filming of a television drama. Again, that doesn't make sense to me. Balenciaga, which had the images in hand for months before the release, called their inclusion of the Supreme Court page unapproved and the result of reckless negligence. Now, one of the individuals, the set designer that was sued, is Nicholas Desjardins, or Desjardins, I don't know. Mr. Desjardins' lawyer, in her statement, said that, quote, there certainly was no malevolent scheme going on. Balenciaga reps were on set during the shoot, overseeing it and handling papers and other props, and Desjardins, as a set designer, was not responsible for image selection from the shoot. Ultimately, image selection would have fallen on the brand, okay, which would be Balenciaga. And then they say, no, they're not suing Gabriel, we know that. What happens next? The long-term repercussions remain to be seen, but look how desperate they are to ensure that we don't notice anything. Look how desperate they are to remind you that your opinion is meaningless so long as it falls even remotely close to the QAnon spectrum. And by the way, that's not even remotely close at all, because apparently everything they dislike is QAnon now. And this didn't start with right-leaning outlets, guys. So the idea that conflating this with QAnon delegitimizes the entire thing. And when they talk about our beliefs, right, which they so kindly fill in for us, right, like this is what they say we believe in. A group of Satan-worshipping elites who run a child sex ring are trying to control our politics and media. I mean, is that what we believe? Or are you speaking for us? And once again, articles like this make it so there's really no reason to look into it. No one just sits back, as they should, and say, you know, like, why do they actually believe that? That's crazy. But I kind of just want to know, like, where do they even get it? Like, they're not pulling it out of thin air. Where does it come from? Well, boy, I wonder. I mean, could it be that it just so happens that everyone remotely involved, but a lot of the key players in this Balenciaga shit seem to be practicing Satanists, or at least very familiar with it? I mean, we have Malak references on a lot of Volkova's page, the former stylist of Balenciaga, as you can see. Ancient Canaanite god of child sacrifice. Malak is not a common thing that people typically know about. We've got pentagrams, just you name it. This is the same shit that we saw previously in 2016 with the pizza-related subject matter. All the same aesthetic, all the same imagery, the Satanism, the sexual innuendo towards kids, the general degeneracy, right? And it's not like only small people are involved in this. Lada Volkova is not a small person. You have Mark Jacobs commenting on this shit. So let's go back in time. For instance, we've connected a lot of Volkova to a lot of different people, not just satanic imagery or pedophilic imagery, but rather to actual predators like Gosha Rubchinsky, who's also a major player in this streetwear fashion world. Gosha, well, Adidas is investigating claims against Gosha, and then we have his leaked DMs here of him asking for nudes from underage guys, boys, that he was casting for, right? So this is different. This is different than your average scandal. So when the New York Times says that we're ridiculous for believing a group of Satan-worshipping elites who run a child sex ring are trying to control our politics and media, well, did I not just show you a few entities right there that seem to be Satanists and are affiliated with child predators? Do you see maybe where we get the idea from? Do you see maybe that we're not pulling it out of thin air? So these people, they talk shit, but they're always going to be too scared, too fearful to ever actually address our main concerns. Let's go back to Alefantis appearing on Megyn Kelly back in 2016. All of the questions that were posed to him were the questions that we didn't even ask. And they avoid all the important ones. Is that surprising? No, of course not. I'm just saying that that's the reality. But let's go back in time to a world that predates everything being a satanic conspiracy, QAnon conspiracy, right? Terry Richardson is just the tip of the iceberg. From the New York Times itself. How long ago is this? October 27th, 2017, 1 year after the pizza stuff, and this was right when Q was first getting started, right? So not everything in the world was a QAnon conspiracy theory yet at this point in time. And you'll see who he is in a moment, I'll elaborate. This week, in an apparently defensive move after a social media outcry, the biggest fashion magazines cut ties with the photographer Terry Richardson over his history of alleged sexual harassment. On Monday, The Telegraph broke the news that James Woolhouse, the Condé Nast International Executive Vice President, had sent a memo saying that the company would no longer be working with the controversial fashion photographer. Any shoots that have been commissioned or any shoots that have been completed but not yet published should be killed and substituted with other material, the memo said. All of these brands are dropping him like a hot potato. Why? It all sounds very responsible, the New York Times goes on. But some industry insiders have begun to question whether fashion's efforts to distance itself from Mr. Richardson is an attempt to band-aid over a deeper crisis. What's the deeper crisis? To make a public example of an offender already accused in order to appear to be taking action, when a much broader and more systemic approach needs to be adopted. Yes. And why would we need a much broader, more systemic approach in order to combat this, quote, deeper crisis that the New York Times says exists within the fashion world? Could we need a much broader and more systemic approach because, well, I don't know, perhaps it's a systemic problem? Could that be it? So, like I said, for those of you that are focusing on nailing down the actual perpetrators, the individuals behind the court documents snuck into the ads, the people behind, specifically behind these shoots, you are missing the wider, more systemic issue. And that's that there's this group of individuals within the fashion world that exhibit the same type of deviant pedophilic behavior, and in fact, take it a step further. Not only seem to dabble in the occult and Satanism, whatever, that what you have is groups with access to models and underage models affiliated with, personally, on a personal level, actual predators, right? Which is why we have Loda Volkova not only posting the satanic imagery and constant sexualization of children, but also hanging out with Gosha Rubchinsky that also seems to share the predilection towards kids, as evidenced by these leaks, these messages. And that's just, what did they say again? That's just the tip of the iceberg. So what does the New York Times mean that there's a deeper crisis here and that we need a bigger, more broad systemic approach? For the first time, I'd have to say I agree with them. Because a network this large doesn't go down overnight. It gets dismantled slowly but surely. And remember, this Balenciaga scandal, we're only seeing what you're seeing on the left side of the screen. And that's barely it. You're not seeing the rest of the connections. You get it? Which is why I made this flowchart. I'm not going to... But once again, it's this repeated pattern of behavior being exhibited by people like Terry. And then, like I said, it just turns out that the network, social network that Terry's a part of, seems to exhibit the same exact behaviors, is the wider point. So, like I said, you don't want to narrow the scope of Balenciaga by sticking with the people that they're pointing the finger at. We need to expose the wider network of these people. Rolling Stone also jumped in on the mix. Why are people convinced Balenciaga is promoting PEDO? Well, here's the thing, like, you wouldn't be asking these questions if you just listened to us, right? I just want to see how they discuss people like you and I. thousands of people said the gift campaign was inappropriate. It promoted child, sexual, so on and so forth. People are destroying Balenciaga merchandise in protest. I saw that started just recently. Here we go. But a larger portion of the outrage can be attributed to a major push from far-right influencers like Candace Owens, Andrew Tate, Kanye West, who have cited the Balenciaga blunder as evidence that the Hollywood elite is actively promoting child you-know-what and PEDO, so on and so forth. There it is. Of course. It's always the far right. It's always the far right. None of this means anything. None of this means anything. It's just a bunch of far-right riffraff. I wish to God one of these people would come onto the show and actively debunk any of this. Any of this. Because notice, I'm not drawing conclusions from it. This pizza-related stuff, this Balenciaga-related stuff, it's not about coming to conclusions, which they say we are. We're not. It's about asking questions. Why are the same people repeatedly connected to one another over time and across different agencies and companies? Why do they exhibit the same type of behavior, the same type of interest in the occult, the same type of interest in Satanism? Why? Why? Is it all coincidence? That's what they'd love to say, right? It's got to be all coincidence. Otherwise, we wouldn't be far-right QAnon conspiracy theorists.